How Easy You Are to Need by Delimeful. Chapter 4. Fall. The humans began to get antsy as it grew closer and closer to the full moon. Virgil couldn't see the night sky from the living room, so he wasn't sure exactly how round the moon was, but he was a werewolf and his body knew what his mind didn't. He spent more time curled up in the heavier blankets, trying to ignore the bone-deep ache that radiated through him, increasing with every day he didn't shift. Still, he stubbornly held on to his human form, not wanting to relinquish the easy camaraderie and relaxing days he'd had with his humans, even if they were terrible at hiding their weird behavior from him. His hearing was enhanced even in human form, so there was no way he could miss the muttered arguments Logan and Roman would have in the kitchen, though they spoke in vague enough terms that he often felt completely lost regardless. He knew he was the source of their anxieties, though, just from the way they looked at him when they thought he wasn't paying attention. The snatches of whispered conversations with his name in them, the occasional hesitance Logan displayed while checking on his wounds. He was healing fast under their care, and wondered if maybe they worried he was going to fight back when the time came. The thought was ridiculous. Hadn't they already realized that Virgil was hopelessly attached? Still, now that he was well enough to walk around without tearing any stitches, he spent a lot of time wandering after one of the three as they went about their daily tasks. A blanket draped over his shoulders to fight off the phantom chills he got from being without a proper pelt. They took to having a shadow well for the most part. Patton would ask him for help planting the spring tulips and teach him how to carefully handle the sprouts. Logan would steadfastly shoot down any of Virgil's attempts to help with household chores, and Roman... Well, any time Virgil followed Roman outside, the dramatic human suddenly found something else indoors that urgently needed doing. He also spent a lot of time clutching at the empty scabbard at his hip, so it didn't take long for Virgil to connect the dots. "You can practice with that thing, you know," he eventually said, startling Roman from his longing window gazing. "Huh?" Roman managed intelligently. Virgil snorted at him. "Your sword? You haven't touched it since my first few days here." It had been unsettling at the beginning, to be honest. He'd never known a hunter to part with a weapon willingly, especially not around a monster. Roman was taken aback for a moment. "Well, it just seemed to make you upset, didn't it? It's fine. My skills are as sharp as ever." He flashed an arrogant smile. He hadn't wanted Virgil to feel threatened during these comfortable weeks, since his humans were ridiculous and kind in the strangest ways, and now he probably didn't want to remind Virgil about how these weeks would inevitably end. "Hey," Virgil said, drawing Roman's attention back. "It's fine. I know I don't have anything to fear from that blade. Certainly not in this form." Roman blinked at him, stunned, and then he smiled again, this one real and soft and resplendent, before jumping to his feet and going to grab his sword. Virgil sat down heavily on the couch, a small grin on his own face, and watched him run through stances and drills for the rest of the afternoon. The next time he saw that sword, it was the evening before the full moon. He'd been peripherally aware of the growing tension between his humans, but as the week progressed, he couldn't drag his attention away from the pain eating at his bones long enough to care. He'd stopped venturing outside, instead staying huddled on the couch and sleeping through most of the day, the way he had back when he'd been too injured to stand. Patton spent some days with him, and the others drawn away to argue with the other two. It was frankly a miracle that Roman stepping into the room managed to catch his attention at all with how terrible he felt. His gaze flickered between Roman's tense expression and the sword at his side, and he realized that despite his best efforts, his time was probably up. "Roman?" he asked anyways, voice rough from sleep. "Hey, Virg," he said, and sat down on the edge of the couch in lieu of answering Virgil's unspoken question. They sat in silence for a moment, and then a moment later heavy footsteps heralded Patton's arrival. He was holding the broom he used to sweep the porch menacingly, and his glare made Virgil shrink despite it being directed solely at Roman. "I thought we agreed we would all talk to Virgil about this together," he said in his "I'm disappointed in you" voice. Roman held his hands up in defense. "I'm just sitting here. I wasn't going to say anything until you guys got back, promise," he insisted, leaving Virgil to look between the two of them with mild confusion and the beginnings of worry. "Talk to me about what? Was something wrong?" They both grew quiet, sharing a loaded glance, and Logan took the opportunity to appear in the hallway, adjusting his glasses with a frown at them both. We wish to speak with you about the approaching full moon, though I am sure you've heard us bickering over the matter in the past few days." Virgil nodded, feeling his heart begin to pound. That was what they had been arguing about? "Sorry about that, Virgil." Patton grimaced apologetically, coming closer to rest a hand on Virgil's shoulder. Virgil shrugged, and Roman shifted on his other side. "So, since we can't exactly put this off much longer, what would you prefer, Virgil? Staying inside, here, or outside?" he asked, moving to stand and pace. Virgil looked up at him, processing the offer. Well, shucks. He was kind of flattered they were dedicated enough to the concept of his comfort to let him get his death blood all over their house. Unless they had a secret basement to use or something. Either way, he wasn't going to take them up on the offer. He wanted to see the forest that had been his home for so long before he died. Outside," he finally responded, and then winced when Patton's face fell. "Are you sure, Virg? It'll be cold and dark and—" "Patton," Logan cut in, not unkindly. "We decided we'd listen to what Virgil wanted, right?" His softest human sniffled. "Right." Virgil felt another wave of pain roll through him, and stiffly began untangling himself from the couch to stand. "I think we should probably do this now." "Now?" Roman squeaked in an embarrassingly high pitch. Patton seemed to agree, and even Logan looked reluctant. It was kind of heartwarming. It seemed like maybe they'd gotten a little attached, too. Still, yeah, now, Virgil sighed regretfully. "I don't think I can hold this for much longer." They couldn't argue with that, and he led the way out of the house, stepping off of the porch and onto the solid dirt. Regretfully, he shrugged off the blanket around his shoulders and handed it over to a tearful Patton. Roman stepped forward, hands tapping out a nervous pattern on the hilt of his sword. "Okay, so what do we need to do? Should we be prepared for your wolf form to attack, or—" "Nah," Virgil shook his head. If he could have found it in himself to attack them to save his own skin, he would have bitten Logan all those weeks ago. Besides, even if he did successfully run away, the idea of returning to his lonely haunting of the forest, dodging his humans' attempts to catch him, being alone again, it wasn't likely he'd survive long there, either. He glanced away from the forest, turning to see Roman's brow furrowed. It was strange, wanting to comfort a hunter instead of being afraid of them. He was strange, bonding to humans. It was no wonder he was going to die. "Don't worry." He gave Roman his best attempt at a wry smile, exhaling nervously. "I get it. I won't make things difficult for you. On my honor," he added, remembering the phrase Roman used so often in his tales. "What?" Roman asked, but Virgil had already released his white-knuckled grip on his human form and fell to all fours as his bones began to crack and shift painfully. He couldn't help but let out a whine. He'd really held this shift back for way too long. After a moment, the shift was finished, and the sense of utter wrongness under his skin finally abated. He let himself stay in a heap of wolf for a moment, panting from exertion. "Virgil?" He huffed once and then got to his feet, shaking to settle his fur. "Whoa!" Roman jumped back, alarm lining his shoulders, hand back to his sword hilt. Understandable. He was a lot bigger in this form, more so than even a normal wolf. He ducked his head slightly, trying to look a bit shorter. The three humans looked at him with varying levels of wariness, Logan and Patton forced back by Roman's outstretched arms. Hey, Roman said, stepping a little closer. "Dark and stormy? You in there?" Virgil rolled his eyes, giving him a sarcastic look despite himself. Did he really think Virgil had so little self-control as to lose himself to his wolf form? He wasn't some newly turned. Roman grinned, shoulders dropping a little, and in the next moment Patton was flinging himself at Virgil. "Patton!" Two voices shouted as his arms wrapped around Virgil's fluffy neck fur. He reared back a little in surprise, and then tapped his nose as gently as possible to his human's head in reprimand. What in the world was Patton thinking, tackling a monster? "Sorry," Patton said, drawing back sheepishly. "I just got overexcited." "Well, I suppose that answers the question of whether or not he's docile," Logan said dryly, relief in his voice. Roman had gone as far as to draw his sword, looking shaken. At least someone in this group had survival instincts. Virgil snorted and then laid down, his heart racing in his throat as though in protest. He'd promised Roman that he'd make things easy. He could at least do that for his strange, confusing humans. He dipped his head at Roman in a mockery of a nod, and then settled between his paws, trusting that it would be quick. "Virgil? What are you doing there, buddy?" Or not. He sighed through his nose. Did they really think he hadn't figured it out by now? He wasn't an idiot. The irritation he felt was almost enough of a distraction to prevent him from trembling as he rolled to the side, letting his underside show and his head roll back to expose his neck. Almost. Everything in him screamed against such a vulnerable move, but he was tired of fighting. There was a sharp intake of breath above him, and his ears flicked at the sound of Roman's voice. "Logan, I need you to tell me that he's not doing what I think he's doing." "It looks like he's asking for belly rubs," Patton chimed in, making Virgil do a full body twitch of embarrassment. Were they making fun of him? "His body language is much too negative for that to be the reason," Logan said, proving himself once again the quick-witted one. "He appears to be waiting for me to kill him." Roman spat as though the words were bitter in his mouth. "He thinks we want to kill him." There was a heartbeat-long pause, and then all three of them were talking over each other in upset voices, upending every one of Virgil's expectations. He recoiled back into an upright position despite himself, staring at them with a complete lack of comprehension. What did Roman mean, thinks? Virgil knew what they wanted from him. But what was the point of pretending at this point? What could their goal possibly be? Virgil rose to his feet, pacing back and forth with his ears pinned back against his skull as he tried to block out the clamor. He needed a mouth that could speak human tongue. Too panicked to care about the pain, he forced himself back into a human form, ignoring the extra appendages that lingered due to his half-hearted shift. "What are you trying to pull?" They quieted as his frantic question, and Logan was the one to regain himself first. "Virgil, we don't want to kill you." "What?" Virgil cut him off, bewildered. "Yes, you do." "No, we don't," Logan rebutted weakly, looking confused at Virgil certainly. "Why would we want to?" "I know you know how magecraft works," Virgil said, narrowing his eyes. "The magical properties of a werewolf pelt are coveted by anyone who knows anything about magic. The potential uses of your skin?" Logan retorted, as though the very idea was ridiculous. Virgil knew otherwise. "Yes? Is it so hard to believe I figure you'd at least get some use out of my corpse? It'd be better—" He bit his tongue on the rest of the sentence. "Is it so hard to believe that maybe we didn't want to kill you at all?" Logan asked, voice icy. "That we aren't monsters who would kill someone who had saved us?" "You're not monsters," Virgil said, voice sharp. "I don't think you want to kill me. Not anymore. But I'm an actual monster. And trust me, I know how humans operate. It's not safe for you to leave me alive, so you won't." Logan stared at him, seemingly stunned into silence, and Virgil nodded, glad to have made him understand. Unfortunately, that meant there was nothing to stop Roman from approaching, sword in hand. Virgil forgot himself and flinched back automatically, ears flattening and eyes closing, and heard a snicked noise. Blades sinking into flesh. But why didn't he feel any pain? He opened his eyes to see the sword driven into the hard dirt almost up to its hilt, and Roman grabbed his hands, ignoring the sharp, inhuman claws, to look at him earnestly. "Listen to me, Virgil. Really listen, okay? We don't want to kill you. We aren't like hunters. You aren't dangerous to us just because you're not human." He leaned in to bump heads with him, and Virgil was astonished to see that he was near tears. "You're our friend, you stupid asshole!" Virgil blinked at him. What?" In the next second, he was slammed into a hug at full force by Patton, who was shaking with silent sobs, occasionally getting a word or two of garbled nonsense out. He hesitantly wrapped his arms around the human, noting the smell of baked goods on him a little hysterically. "Virgil." Logan crouched next to him, completing the huddle of humans around him. Virgil looked up at him helplessly, Patton still attached to him like a very upset limpet. "It's late, and you clearly need time to process what we've said and vice versa. Please, let's rest for now." Seeing as he could barely put two thoughts together at the moment, it was a good idea. He nodded, though the thought of forcing his human form for another night was enough to make him wince. Logan sagged slightly in relief, and then pulled Roman to his feet and carefully detangled an unwilling Patton from him, soothing him with a few whispered words. When Logan started to get up, however, Logan motioned him back down. Shift on the ground, Verge. It will keep you from placing undue stress on your bones as a quadruped. Shift? Virgil echoed dumbly. Yes, shift, Logan responded, raising an eyebrow. I won't have you spending the night in a form that pains you to maintain, though I hope you'll explain the mechanics of that to me later. For now, the living room is big enough to hold all of us, even with you at your largest. Blanket fort, Roman said solemnly, and Patton brightened slightly, still wiping at his face. An hour later, settled into a nest of pillows and blankets and surrounded by his humans, each one resting a hand on his fur as though afraid he'd somehow vanish, Virgil was drifting off into the first peaceful sleep he'd had in months. Things weren't fixed, wouldn't be for a while, but at the moment, he was surrounded by his pack, and warmer than he'd ever felt before. That was the end of How Easy You Are to Need by Delimeful. The link to the fic will be in the description of this video, and also a link to you can find Delimeful or you can find me on Tumblr. Thanks for listening!